Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to cover why your business numbers that you're tracking aren't changing anything. This happens because we aim to make data-informed decisions as a founder, and we're going to cover the power of trade-offs and what every business leader needs to know. But I see what happens often with founders or business owners. They have a dashboard, and you have a spreadsheet or a report that lands in your inbox every Monday with all the key numbers, whatever that set of numbers you chose is, maybe revenue, expenses, margin, cash flow. And you give yourself a pat in the back because you're like, I am looking at my numbers, I'm tracking them, or maybe you're reviewing your P&L. For sure, you're ahead of a lot of business owners. But the problem is not that you're looking at your numbers. It's that what are you doing or changing because of the numbers that you're seeing? And this is where I often see a gap for a lot of business owners because they don't do anything about the data that they have in front of them. So now I know this can be an uncomfortable truth, but this happens to the best owners out there because not sure what to do about the data they're getting. The data might say revenue's up or expenses are up, and then they stop at that. They're like, good to know, go on life as usual, business as usual. And this is the problem that we want to address and adjust as part of our game plan on business ownership and how we run the numbers in our company. So there's a difference between tracking the numbers, being truly data informed, and we're going to go through that comparison here in a minute because I want to introduce to you also the concepts around trade-offs, which is a lot of what we talk to clients about, and then use that data awareness to move to data informed and action taking. So let's dive right in. Okay, so there are two types of business owners, those who have data and those who use data. So data where you know your numbers exist, you know maybe what they are, you check them maybe every month, but the data informed CEO is going to tie a direct line to those numbers and decisions they want to make going forward. They're going to prioritize things differently because of the data they're seeing, and they're going to allocate resources differently based on the information they're reviewing. There's an important idea around what we call reporting theater, where you have the data and it gives you a sense of control and progress, but you're not actually driving any change. Numbers without decisions are just historical financial reviews, which might be interesting. They can definitely be insightful, but they can be so much more powerful if you then take that to make a different outcome happen going forward because of that data. The goal of this financial visibility is not just information or awareness, is really action driven outcomes because of it. So every metric that you track should come with a question on, if this number move, what would we do differently? So now that we've established kind of the two areas or two camps that CEOs are in, let's talk about why smart people don't act on their data. Because this might be you. You might be a really experienced CEO, you've been doing this for a while, you're growing your company, and then somehow you still don't take action on the information you're given. And that is because maybe you have too much data or not enough quality data. And this is where you have to ask yourself, like, what does that look like? And what are the key metrics we need to track? What is the right information I need in front of me in order to make this next decision? You maybe lack a decision framework. You really don't know what to do with it because you haven't really sorted out what is your framework for decision making around the information. Is that every time revenue goes up 20%, we're going to invest in XYZ. When profit is down 5%, we're going to revisit pricing and we're going to look at our service offering margins. So you start to connect the dots when you have the right frameworks to make decisions, but without those, you're just going to feel paralyzed. And there's obviously a fear of trade-offs, the biggest one that keeps CEOs stuck, and that is stopping something or cutting something or choosing this over that because they are uncomfortable with what the outcome might be, because we don't know what the outcome might be yet, unless we are scenario planning and really outlining what are the risks, pros and cons, growth opportunities we might try to capture by making that trade-off decision. And that's when it starts to feel more comfortable or certain a path forward, because at least we've thought about it, explored it before making that decision, which is key, that before. In my years of being a CFO for small companies, I often find that the bottleneck is not the data. Like normally we have a lot of information available and we can analyze it. It's really the willingness to make a decision. That's what keeps us stuck. And then that's where the CFO partnership really is key to help unlock that, because then they'll feel more confident after going through the framework and exploring potential outcomes of the decision. You feel much more confidence in moving forward with that decision with clarity, because you have done that exercise of reviewing what could be the outcome before you made it. And making sure that if you have a lot of data, that you don't get analysis paralysis, where you're just looking at data and more data and more data and never making a decision. So sometimes we have to make decisions with not perfect data, and that is okay, because we are making a decision based on what we know today. That might change. We might find out that other components came into play after the fact. That doesn't mean the quality of your decision was bad in the moment, because you were operating with the information you had at that point in time. So separate your decision from the outcome. Now let's move on to like the power of trade-offs, because a lot of companies don't use this framework of decision making to prioritize what comes next in their business. And every financial decision tends to have a trade-off, whether stated or not. And making sure that you're understanding what that trade-off is going to be important in how you make decisions. So for example, your trade-offs can be something like, it could be money, like cash, it could be time, it could be people, it could be attention, and all of those resources are finite. So making sure that you understand what is the trade-off on the other side of this is going to be critical. So to put a little bit more tangible example here, imagine your data shows your customer acquisition costs are rising while value is holding steady. So it's going to become a trade-off conversation around, do you invest to bring your customer acquisition costs, your CAC down, or do you double down on retention to maximize lifetime value of that customer? And do you accept the margin compressions to buy that market share? So this is just one example of how trade-offs show up in our business. It's sometimes you can afford to hire one employee, or you can put money towards marketing. Which problem are you trying to solve, and which one comes first, and prioritize in between the finite resources you have, because maybe you only have so much money to allocate to one of the two. And you have to decide, do we need capacity, or do we need more leads and new clients coming in, or more product sales to fulfill our existing capacity? And sometimes it is a trade-off, because you might need both and you only have resources for one. Now, we unfortunately in our businesses can't afford to do it all at once. And so it's important that as a CEO, you're prioritizing with your CFO what's going to move the needle in the business, what's going to create the growth we want to see, what's going to drive more of the efficiency, which one comes first. Do we want to grow in the way we're currently at, or do we want to drive efficiency first before we grow? These are the kind of conversations we want to be having and currently have with our clients around, where do we want to put our dollars? How do we want to allocate, on what are we choosing to do versus not choosing to do, which is just as important, because default decision is also a decision. So we want to make sure we're proactively driving that on our own. And then trade-offs provide clarity for what you're optimizing for, because now you know, first of all, this is not a finance decision. This is just a finance supported decision, meaning the CEO still has the call or final say in it. Finance is just providing like the framework and the data and the environment and perspective to make this better decision on what to trade off and why. Another example of data-informed decision making is, we were reviewing Q1 for some of our clients, and we saw that total completed service numbers were down. And what we did is we say, here's where we're at compared to what we had forecasted. We are below the goal. What we need to do next is go back to the team and work with them on getting that completed service numbers up. And here's how we're going to go do that. So this is a good example of how we take data and information and turn it into action-taking decision making going forward. Well, that wasn't a trade-off decision, because we're not trading off. We might also be having a conversation on, do we want to bring on more employees at this time, or do we want to wait till we fix this gap first and then add additional capacity? That is a good example of a trade-off conversation that follows that initial discussion. Okay, so now let's talk about what data-informed decision-making actually looks like, because I often find a lot of companies that has lots of metrics that mean nothing. And when I ask them, why are you tracking this? They really don't know. They're like, well, we just been tracking that. And I'm like, well, what are people doing because of the data inside every week that they're receiving on their inbox? And often I get a blank stare of like, what do you mean? And this is exactly what it means. Like, it's no waste efforts tracking things if we're not going to do something about it. We need to be able able to answer, so what? We want to start with a few metrics that are meaningful. What are you tracking that makes a difference? And make sure that you're consistently tracking the same metrics so you can see how it's making progress, how it's improving or declining, and then what are you doing to make sure that metric moves in the direction that you want to see it. Each metric should have an owner and someone responsible for driving to whatever the goal is for that metric. And make sure it's quantifiable, of course, and track it somewhere so that you have the historical but also the forward-looking expectation of what that metric should do for the business. For example, it could be number of leads coming into the business. Now, not all data is going to be measured in the same cadence either. Like some might be weekly, some might be monthly or quarterly, or some might be annually. And that's just something you need to define for the type of data that you're collecting and what it will do for the company. But again, going back to my initial question on so what, answering that is going to be the most important unlock for your business. If you can answer, okay, this looks like this, so what are we going to do next? Should be your follow-on question. And what are we going to do differently, more of, because it's working? Now, I find this is more a habit than it is a system, because you can track the data. That part is easy, but really making the habit of asking, what are we going to do with the information we're getting? How are we going to operate differently? Do we need to hire? Do we need to make a trade-off between department expenditure? So it just, you need to have that conversation. Also the implications of that change, by the way, because we don't take that lightly. We talked about tracking numbers as just the base level. And if you're already doing this, congratulations, because a lot of business owners don't even do that. So tracking the numbers is important. Looking at them is important. But more importantly, what you're doing with those numbers is really key, and making that decision tied to the numbers. And then last but not least, trade-offs. Such an important piece of action taking you can put into your business is, do we need to shift things around? Do we need to give something up to get something better or bigger? Do we want to shift what the investments look like to, again, make those different results happen? So I often tell business owners the biggest issues come from decisions that we made without thinking about the potential consequences first. Now we have to just go with it, versus it when we're evaluating a decision before making it. Now we can understand the consequences, either good or bad, that we can deal with before making that decision. So make sure you're using that power of data and data-informed decisions and trade-offs as a framework to help you better manage your business to the outcomes that you want to see happening. And if you need some help with this, we'll be happy to provide you support on our CFO advisory services, and we can have you book a call with us at wealthworthwithin.com. Let's get started. It's all free consultation to just understand what are your support needs. And if this episode resonated with you, make sure to share it with another business owner who's looking for this information on how to make better informed financial decisions and what information is key for them to drive their business to the growth goals they want to see happen. Thank you for being here, being a listener. Until next time, have a good day.